Hey everyone, it's Eric Huey, host of the Gen Y Leaders podcast, where we prepare millennials to be leaders of the future. Now, if you're familiar with the podcast, you know that it's usually interview-based, and we tell the success stories of high-performing millennials. Each time, I tend to ask a couple of the same questions. Not all the same questions, because that would be a boring podcast, but there are a key 1 to 2 questions that I ask every guest on the show. And one of those is, what books or resources have made a positive impact in your life or in your business? Books are such incredible resources because they take years upon years of people's successes and failures and condense them into a few hours of reading. The mission of the book breakdown is to take those few hours of reading and then further condense them into 15 minutes or less of listening. This is the Gen Y Leader Podcast Book Breakdown.
Hello listeners, this is Brent Vogel, and in this podcast I'll be doing a Gen Y Leaders Book Breakdown. If you're a follower of this podcast, you may remember me from the very first episode. I had the honor from Eric of being the first interview for the show. That means either one of two things. Eric thinks very highly of me and wanted me to start us off, or that he felt like I was expendable enough to be the first guinea pig, as he ironed out the kinks. But since that last interview, I'm still with Stryker, but now as a full-line sales representative working out of Columbia, Missouri. My wife Rachel and I are living together now after a short stint apart for our careers. It was all worth it. She's finished up PA school and just started working for the MU Health System. So what is this book today? 12 Rules for Life, An Antidote to Chaos by Jordan B. Peterson. I chose to share this book with you because it offers truth. Some very ancient truth, applied to life's very modern problems. This is a hidden problem of today. Thousands of years of wisdom accumulated from our ancestors, wisdom tried and tested again and again, which stands the test of time, has been severely devalued lately by a generation seeking to, once again, attempt to change the framework. We live in unique times, as we are the first generation, at least as long as we can see, to have been taught two contradictory ideas about morality. Postmodernist theorists have dominated the landscape lately with their voice and have seemed to have succeeded in pushing that morality is relative in their eyes, that there is no such thing as right or wrong in anything really, that it depends on the frame of mind, culture, or situation that you're in. And two, pushing that absolute tolerance of someone else's ways is of utmost importance. So this emphasis, what I've noticed and why I've been fond of Jordan's work is this emphasis on tolerance, as I read from the foreword of this book, quote, is so paramount that for many, one of the worst character flaws to have now is to be what we call judgmental. And since we don't know right from wrong or what is good, just about the most important thing an adult can do is give a young person advice on even how to live, end quote. Do we see the predicament? We've trapped ourselves from the necessary freedom to pass down the wisdom of the ages, knowledge about how to acquire virtues. Nowadays, teaching your virtues may be seen as not relevant or even oppressive. Now, you'd be what some may call self-righteous. Heck, I don't want to be judged by others. The societal pressures holds me back too. This is why I see Dr. Peterson's passion is to break through this wall of being built around us right now and help us reconsider what is truly good, to sort order from chaos, to discover the deep truths of life, to help the world be a better place, to help the individual make their life a better place. Because the whole is only as good as because of its parts. And he does this simply by helping the individual put their life in order, helping the individual find meaning. So for decades, Jordan Peterson has served clients as a clinical psychologist and inspired students as a celebrated professor at Harvard and University of Toronto. And I quote from his overture in the book, "I hope that these rules and their accompanying essays will help people understand what they already know. That the soul of the individual eternally hungers for the heroism of genuine being, and that the willingness to take on that responsibility is identical to the decisions to live a meaningful life," end quote. So if you take anything away from this book, it's that right there, to take responsibility for your own life, period. So this book is structured as 12 rules with a simple point driven home and accompanied by essays of insight. It comes, from history, religion, science, philosophy, and that's why I loved his work. I'm a Christian myself. I love his references from the Bible. I also love science and structure of how things work. And I'm fond of philosophy. Not so much history, but I'm beginning to. But either way, no matter which thing you like, I feel like anyone can relate to his work. You don't have to dive into every word of every chapter, but, at least give this one a try. So I'm going to dive into just 4 of the 12 because 12 is just too much to get into. So these 4 I deem most necessary because the others consist of interactions and relationships. And these first 4, which would prepare you for those relationships, these can be applied immediately to the individual first. Side note, that also makes the most sense given our recent pandemic lock-in predicament. So number 1, stand up straight with your shoulders back. Now that sounds simple, and it makes sense. I think we innately know it brings presence and confidence, which are positive. But here's the severe importance of this. Our brain runs on serotonin, the feel-good chemical. When we win or succeed at something, we have higher levels of serotonin flowing through us. We feel better and more confident. We stand taller and project a more confident image. We literally live differently. When this happens, it feeds more chances of success. This is a psychophysiological loop that is very real. And the opposite is also true. Once one is defeated or feels less than for whatever reason, less serotonin as a result, droops forward, acts in a more defensive, protectionary manner, gives off the survival vibe, and thus a feedback loop ensues. So here's the point of this rule. Our physical stance is simply one of the many parts of that feedback loop. And it's the most basic one that I feel like we can interrupt. I think that's why he chose this. And it also legitimately physically creates a response that produces less serotonin. It's an actual physical response. So the fact that we have an actual consciousness as human beings, we can be aware of this and choose to work on this loop. So to back up his claim, Jordan uses lobsters, yes, lobsters, as the main parallel here. Why lobsters? Because in the massive evolutionary process, even lobsters have these same processes. The serotonin, their posture, their win or loss in battle, and how it affects them, and how they choose to act afterwards as a result. This is to make clear the point that this is a deep innate process. It's how your brain is wired at a fundamental level. Whether you like it or not, you are automatically subconsciously always assessing yourself and everyone in a dominance hierarchy. It's not a bad thing, it's just to be aware of it. Give yourself a chance and break the loop. So if you don't focus on this, you quite simply could choose an endless spiral of losses. Negativity, less serotonin, less confidence, more fear, then acting and appearing accordingly, then being treated accordingly, and so on. So it's important to note that standing up physically also implies and invokes the demand standing up metaphysically. It means you are voluntarily accepting the burden of life, facing the demands of life voluntarily. The demands will always be there. Will you do it voluntarily, or let it beat you down and resist and resent it? So we'll end each rule with a quote. This is going to be the longest one of the talk today. Each rule in the book ends with a very poetic call to action, always with a deep, heartfelt reason as to why to do it. So here's a long quote from him here, and then we'll move on to the next ones. So attend carefully to your posture. Quit drooping and hunching around. Speak your mind. Put your desires forward, as if you had a right to them, at least the same right as others. Walk tall and gaze forthrightly ahead. Dare to be dangerous. Encourage the serotonin to flow plentifully through the neural pathways, desperate for its calming influence. People, including yourself, will start to assume that you are more competent and able, or at least they will not immediately conclude the reverse. Emboldened by this positive responses you are now receiving, you will begin to be less anxious. You will then find it easier to pay attention to the subtle social cues that people exchange when they are communicating. Your conversations will flow better, with fewer awkward pauses. This will make you more likely to meet people, interact with them, impress them. Doing so will not only genuinely increase the probability that good things will happen to you, it will also make those good things feel better when they do happen. Thus strengthened and emboldened, you may choose to embrace being and work for its furtherance and improvement. Thus strengthened, you may be able to stand even during the illness of a loved one, even during the death of a parent, and allow others to find strength alongside you when they would otherwise be overwhelmed with despair. Thus emboldened, you will embark on the voyage of your life. Let the light shine, so to speak, on the heavenly hill and pursue your rightful destiny. Then the meaning of life may be sufficient to keep your corrupting influence of mortal despair at bay. then you may be able to accept the terrible burden of the world and find joy. Look for your inspiration to the victorious lobster with its 350 million years of practical wisdom. Stand up straight with your shoulders back. Number 2, treat yourself like someone you're responsible for helping. This is a call to treat yourself better. We treat ourselves with way less respect than we treat others. For example, did you know people are better at administering prescription medications to their pets more than themselves? The simple truth is, if so, you care more about them than yourself, and actions speak it. Why is this? This is a question Jordan is diving into, and we all need to be aware of this answer. It's a hard truth, but because we are conscious of ourselves, we, unlike other life, comprehend our fundamental weaknesses, vulnerabilities, and subjugation to pain and death. We know all the little faults and failures we have as we strive forward. No one knows the individual better than the individual himself. I think we can all admit this. So, knowing all of our own details, however dark they may be, even if they are just thoughts sometimes, there can be an unfortunate tendency to fall into the trap of thinking you're unworthy, and thus treating yourself with less respect than you treat others. I think we can all understand this. So unfortunately, we fall into this trap. Okay? So the action steps he helps us to change our paradigm, change perspective. See how genuinely you love to care for someone else, whether a child, a grandparent, or a pet, then detach yourself and realize that they or someone else feels the same way about you. Come to the realization that they need you and see you in the same beautiful way. You are so needed for care and attention. So detach in this way and see that you too should treat yourself with respect and care, just like you do for someone else you're responsible for helping. So this is not to be selfish. It's to genuinely care about your well-being and respect yourself, and to give credit to yourself when it's due. Be gentler with yourself. This also means it's not always feel-good stuff for yourself. You'd want someone you care for to eat well, sleep well, and exercise well too. So you're going to have to do those things for yourself. So Jordan poetically writes, I quote, "We deserve some respect. You deserve some respect. You are important to other people as much as to yourself. You have some vital role to play in this unfolding destiny of the world. You are, therefore, morally obliged to take care of yourself. You should take care of, help, and be good to yourself the same way you would take care of, help, and be good to someone you loved and valued. You could begin by treating yourself as if you were someone you are responsible for helping." Number 3, compare yourself to who you were yesterday, not to who someone else is today. So in this one, he's talking about how we are aiming creatures and we're always driving to better ourselves, right? But in that, we tend to, of course, compare ourselves to people around us, or the best examples we try to find from that. But what he argues here is, he goes deeper. These are common things that we've all heard before, but he goes deeper. He says, there are multiple dimensions to your life: family, friends, career, health. What happens to you, what you've done this far, how you got where you are today is infinitely complex, and it's impossible to replicate. You and your life are infinitely unique. Why then should you even compare to someone else who has an infinite amount of different happenings that have happened in their dimensions? So comparing your success in one area to someone else to compare using only one dimension is just not reasonable. It's not fair to yourself, and it's actually destructive. I mean, people get down on themselves. It takes the spirit out of them. They can get bitter and become resentful. So the only true comparison is yourself. You have all the same dimensions, so you might as well just compare to who you were yesterday. Plus, you don't even know the other parts of the other people's lives. You just don't know. You could be exponentially ahead of them in other areas, such as the family connection, maybe. You just don't know. So here's what's worse. We've become digitally connected to the entire 7 billion others on the planet, so our hierarchies of accomplishment are now dizzyingly vertical, he says. It'll just never end. It's magnified. So be careful how you compare yourself. Is it to you yesterday? Hopefully it is. So Jordan writes here, quote, "Realization is dawning. Instead of playing the tyrant, therefore, you are paying attention. You are telling the truth instead of manipulating the world. You are negotiating instead of playing the martyr or tyrant. You no longer have to be envious because you no longer Know that someone else truly has it better. You no longer have to be frustrated because you have learned to aim low and to be patient. You are discovering who you are and what you want, and what you're willing to do. You are finding that the solutions to your particular problems have to be tailored to you, personally and precisely. You are less concerned with the actions of the other people because you have plenty to do yourself. Compare yourself to who you were yesterday, not to who someone else is today. And number 4, set your house in perfect order before you criticize the world. This one sounds like a don't judge your neighbor kind of thing, focused on fixing your faults first type of rule. It's actually not that. This is an essay on a deeper and unfortunate, darker truth of life that people can get to the point of hate and resentment so deep they criticize the world or God or being itself. Through many stories, Jordan expresses examples of how people deal with sufferings and harsh realities of life. The conclusion really is one ends up with either searching for vengeance or transformation. So on an emotional level, this is such a difficult chapter to cover that we will keep this as simple as that for now, that you are going to let yourself go down the path that leads to resentment or vengeance, or resentment or vengeance, or are you going to ask yourself what you can do about it and lead yourself to transformation for the better? Maybe one example we can give here from this book was, let's see here. He writes, we build structures to live in. We build facilities, states, countries. Success makes us complacent, though. We forget to pay attention. We take what we have for granted. We turn a blind eye. We fail to notice that things are changing or that corruption is taking root, and everything falls apart. And the example then is when the New Orleans flooded, we couldn't have prevented the hurricane, but the Flood Control Act of 1965 was already there and in place, mandated for improvements of the levee system. The system was to be completed by 1978. That's goodwill, thinking forward. We have knowledge. But 40 years later, only 60% of it was done. Willful blindness and corruption took the city down. Prevention of disasters was possible. So we use this metaphor for our life. So consider your circumstances before you just go judge the world if anything bad happens. Start small. Ask yourself questions. Have you taken full advantage of the opportunities offered to you? Are you working hard on your career or letting bitterness and resentment hold you back? Have you made peace with your brother? Are you treating your spouse and children with dignity and respect? Do you have habits that are destroying your health and well-being? So on and so on. He writes, don't blame capitalism or the radical left. Have some humility. If you cannot bring peace to your household first, how do you suppose to restructure or rule a city? Who knows what existence might be like if we all decided to strive for the best? Set your house in perfect order before you criticize the world. So that's the breakdown. This is the beauty of these rules. Easy to remember one-liners, yet backed by such wisdom and purpose. A why. And that why always connected to making the world a little better place to live, for you, for everyone, to accept that life is not so easy, but to stand tall during it anyway. To not fall into the pit of nihilism, but instead to give your life meaning and purpose, to help others do the same, and sharing that love and life together. So thanks for listening. This is a fun book breakdown. I hope to do it again. I hope you enjoyed, and I hope you took away some inspiration to make the world a little better place.